The oily light overhead made my skin look grey, almost ghost-like, as I stared at the clipboard trembling in my hands. The supervisor, Alan, with his nicotine-stained fingers and voice raw from habit, looked at each of us as though we were bad bread he'd have to throw out in the morning. He didn't say much, just Perils made a decision. Sorry, Colin, and then his gaze flicked down, embarrassed to see me shrink. Dawn barely crept through the grimy windows, slicing the factory floor in watery golds. The heavy scent of yeast and flour hung thick on my clothes, refusing to fade even after I handed in my badge. The air outside strung a little sharp and expectant, as if relieved to see me go. I watched my breath fog in the early chill, hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets, head bowed. That walk home was quiet, all trains and steel, trucks squealing around corners with bread for every corner deli in Sydney, except me. I'd always thought the worst part of losing a job would be the desperation, but it wasn't. It was the clarity. Bread had been just a paycheck. What I dreamed of making, the kind of pastry that melts on your tongue and flickers across your memory, nobody in my world believed in that. Back at my parents' flat in Bankstown, the blinds were already pulled against the day. I shut the door quietly, tried to tuck my shoes in place, but the floor creaked and Mum's voice shot out from the kitchen. "Colin, you're home early, what happened?" I stared at the plastic-coated table, the mug ring stains, the battered box of tea bags beside the kettle. I just said, redundant, they let a few of us go. She clicked her tongue. That's the third job in 2 years. She didn't hide the worry, but her eyes darted up to the Virgin Mary on the wall, a silent prayer for another answer. Dad shuffled out in his robe, hair a wild white halo. "You need to get real about work, son. No one's coming with a silver platter." I looked at my hands, raw from handling dough, nicked from careless knife-work. Dreams weren't something we indulged in our circles. Real life was rent, groceries, old appliances needing parts. I'd spoken just once about wanting to go to pastry school, maybe open a little place of my own. They'd laughed, thinking it pride or a phase. "You want to make those tiny cakes like TV people," my sister Farida had snorted once, half amused, half offended. "Grow up, Colin, you're a man, bakeries are for old ladies and housewives." But after that day at the factory, something inside me wouldn't die. Maybe it was grief for the life I'd bent myself into, maybe it was a final clarity that even if I failed, it would be my own mistake, not theirs. The next months blurred. I hunted jobs and washed plates in a crowded cafe near the quay, endured the burning lectures from Dad, strained silences at dinner. I saved every scrap, burnt the candle at both ends. I bought my first real chef's knife in secret, feeling joy like hunger in my stomach. I spent midnight hours watching French pastry shows on a faintly buzzing laptop, scribbling notes until my eyes strung. My siblings' jeers became background noise, their friends' laughter just another layer I needed into my doze at sunrise. When I got into a decent pastry program at a city technical school, I didn't mention it until the envelope arrived, bold gold crest that caught the kitchen light. Mum turned it over, lips pressed thin. "You're still young, don't you want to find something more safe?" And Dad, his hands tightening on his tea mug, said, "Life isn't a fairy tale. You keep chasing nothing, you'll come back with less than nothing." But I started anyway. The nights were long, dry textbooks and sticky sugar, money so tight I skipped the train and ran between stations in the rain more than once. Every so often, the ache of not being believed caught up to me in a pang of shame, especially when I passed the old bakery down the street, the owner watching me as though he knew exactly how little I belonged. The city was a vast map of people who would never know your name, but it meant nobody could tell me who I was. The chefs at school cut through my pretensions like butter. "Sloppiness is not creativity, Mr. Haddad," one of them snapped after I overmixed a batch of chew and split the cream. "You want to make art, start with precision." The hours got harder before they got easier. I failed my first round of practical exams, burnt the tart case, pipes uneven, fruit slipped down the sides. That night I laid in bed, listening to the hum of traffic through the window, tears hot against my cheek, familiar whispers from home ringing in my head. Not enough, not realistic, not you. But one morning, as I piped neat rings of pate a chew in the school's kitchen, steam hissing, a thought surfaced. Love was in the trying, in the messy middle when everyone already thinks you've failed. The hush before dawn was the same on every continent. I just needed to make something that could sit in someone's memory, that's all. I saved and borrowed and worked, in catering kitchens, rolling mountains of Danish dough before breakfast trays needed filling, in glossy city patisseries where accents mixed and managers watched you move with hawk eyes. Sydney's air gets sharp in winter, rolling in from the fjords. I grew used to breathing it deep while unloading boxes, pouring passion into lamination, folding butter into flour until my arms trembled and my heart caught on each layer. Some nights I'd walk past the opera house, sugar dust tracking in my shoes, lonely but sure that something was changing for me even if nobody saw it. Years slip past when you're busy surviving. My family's voices softened from disbelief to guarded tolerance. Mum told friends about my school thing, then stopped talking about my work at all. I didn't mind. When you believe in something so small, even ridiculous, you start to crave the satisfaction of being proved right, but you also grow to value the hush, the craft, the creation behind closed doors. My break came on a cold autumn morning. I'd started to sell my pastries in farmers' markets, tiny cakes, glossy tarts, eclairs filled just so, their tops gleaming with chocolate glaze. A chef from a boutique hotel tried one, then called up his boss. Their head pastry chef was leaving. They'd seen my work on Instagram. Would I come in for a trial? The kitchen was nothing like the places I'd worked, quiet except for the whir of a stand mixer, elegant in every detail. I spent an hour on a plated dessert, layering flavors, nervously adjusting plates when my hand shook. The manager sampled a spoonful, then nodded, slow and considering. "You local?" he asked. "You train in France?" "Bankstown," I replied, not meeting his eyes. "No, I learned here." He grinned, white teeth flashing. "Welcome aboard." I called Mum from the bus stop. "I got the job." "Head pastry chef." There was silence, just city noise filtering through. Then she whispered, "Really? That's wonderful, Colin." Half triumph, half relief. I had transmuted 1,000 tiny failures into one glowing shot at redemption. The next years were rinse-repeat, long hours, tourists and Instagrammers queuing for anything sweet, orders from event planners and editors. The city caught onto the Sydney puff, my own creation, chew pastry spun into sugar shells, filled with wattle seed custard and lemon myrtle cream. Every bowl, every tray I sent out, I shaped with the patience the old me had never known. Recognition trickled in, a local food magazine write-up first, then a segment on national TV. I watched myself move awkwardly on screen, eyes hollow with fatigue but alive with pride, talking about how baking is warmth, how a cake can say, "I understand." Most of my old community just saw headlines, Instagram clips passed around at gatherings, usually with bewildered expressions. "That can't be Colin," Farida texted once, a video of me plating a dessert. "You can't have learned that in Sydney." I sent a smiley, then put my phone down. One June afternoon, the hotel manager called me into his office. "We're opening a flagship in the Inner West, Colin. We want you as partner patissier, your own kitchen, menu, everything. You'll run it, you want it." My heart hammered, yes, I want it. So it began. Weeks of plans, tastings, fussing with electricians and floors, the scent of paint and clean paper swallowing up my doubts. I poured everything into those months, recipe cards culled from midnight inspirations, little touches from home, hints of cardamom and rose water. When the sign went up, Colin's Pastries, it didn't seem real, not until customers stood outside in the pre-dawn, bracing themselves against the first winter gusts. The morning of the opening, I sent a flurry of messages to my family, nothing too emotional, just "soft launch today at 10. Come if you like, it'd mean a lot." No immediate replies. Maybe I thought they couldn't stand to see me stumble. Part of me wanted to curl up, take shelter in the kitchen bustle. But the doors opened, the bakery filled in a slow, dizzy stream. Old women clutching hats, couples with little white dogs. The first bite from a grey-haired gent who closed his eyes murmured, "Reminds me of Paris." I retreated behind the pass, plating mille-feuille with trembling hands. Then out of the blue, Mum and Dad walking slowly like visitors at an art gallery, Farida and her husband holding back just by the counter. I caught their faces as the barista handed over a pastry bag with my name on it, skepticism warring with curiosity. I fished out a tray and brought it over, 3 Sid puffs and my own riff on Dad's favorite, pistachio-filled semolina cake, not too sweet, orange blossom on the edge. Mum's fingers shook as she lifted the pastry, Dad watching crumple-faced, half mindful it was all some elaborate joke. Then they ate, slow at first like they were expecting it to taste of rubber or disappointment, but Mum's eyes widened. She pressed a napkin to her lips, silent. Dad chewed, then took another bite, silent for longer than I'd ever seen him. Farida studied the layers, tentatively breaking the crust with her fork. "You really did all this," she whispered. I nodded, exhausted and charged all at once. Every bit, design the kitchen, the recipes, the walls, everything, this is my place. Customers around them murmured approval, more phones came out, the queue pressed to the glass. But all their noise faded as I watched Mum dab at her eyes, fighting tears. You made it real, she said softly, almost apologetic. We didn't know how badly we needed to see it. Dad cleared his throat, voice gruff. You built something, Colin, you stuck it out. Farida set her fork down, eyes soft with something I'd never seen before, not pity but pride. Looks like you're the only one in this family who dreamed big enough. The old doubts, the shame from 1,000 careless jokes, the names they called me, the gentle but insistent hands steering me back to sense, all dropped away, worthless now. For the first time I saw my family see me, really see, not the ghost from the factory floor nor Colin the oddball, but someone who built something impossible, layer by layer. Around us the bakery swelled with laughter, cups chiming, the calls of new customers. That night when the shutters rolled down and the street stilled, I walked the length of my kitchen alone. I listened to the rustle of wax paper, the faint tang of cooled caramel thick in the air. Behind me the city's lights shimmered on the glass, and I felt complete, grief remade into substance, rejection into sweetness, clarity into a homecoming. I washed my hands one more time, feeling the old scars and fresh calluses. Sydney, the city I'd once walked as an outsider, felt suddenly smaller, almost tender. I'd been mocked out of dreaming, but now every bite that crossed my counter was a quiet, concrete proof. I belonged. Here, the ridiculous and impossible were just things you hadn't gotten your hands on yet. And the world, in its own stubborn way, finally tasted what I'd always wanted to say.